There's definitely going to be a crash. It's just not what you think. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen a few videos going on talking about a potential gaming crash that might happen sooner or later. And trust me, with a lot of the bad practices that have been happening over the decades, I can definitely see why people would want that. And of course, I'm still on your guys' side, but I think we have to talk about something first. I don't really think a lot of people know about the gaming crash. It's more so used as a buzzword than anything else. Don't get me wrong, I also want the video game industry in order to, thrive and make better practices when it comes to consumers. But it's like, I don't know, some of the things that happened in 1983 are not necessarily happening here, but there is comparisons that you could make. When you get to brass tacks, it can be a little different to how we're dealing with things nowadays. Does that mean that there's no percentage chance for a gaming crash? No. It's just going to happen a different way. So I guess before we actually go into how this gaming crash is going to happen, we kind of have to have sort of background information of the previous gaming crash that happened in 1893. So let's just do that. Just a brief summary of what happened back then, and let's just see if it actually applies to today. It's actually very funny. See, we call it the video game crash, but it honestly only really affected one type of video game. That would be the home console market. When it came to computer games in general, or arcades at the time, they were still actually going really strong. As for the console market, there was a lot of different reasons as to why it kind of plummeted. I'll just list a few and then we'll go over them. That would be market saturation, anti-piracy, booming too rapidly, overproduction, and finally, just fucking shitty games. When it comes to saturation, we kind of see it a little differently, because we have Xbox, we have PlayStation, we have PC, and we have Nintendo. Back then, when it came to the 80s, there was like 15. There's the Atari, the Intellivision, Coleco, Fairchild, Bally Astrocade. There's a whole lot more, like tens more. Because there was like 15 to 20 different ways in order to get a home console, you had too many options, especially when usually they played the same games. Options are usually good, but if they all play the same games and they don't give you anything of benefit when it comes to the consumers usually, a lot of people aren't really gonna wanna, pick between 15. So if there's 15 to 20 different consoles and they all have the same issues, you can definitely see how it can be a problem. Piracy was also really rampant. See, unlike Japan's laws at the time, our anti-piracy laws weren't really that effective, and that kind of meant that as soon as we saw a boom in video games before 1983, what happens is that you saw a lot of rushed bad games go onto the market, and really there wasn't a lot that you could do about it. It made it worse because these low quality games could really be on most, if not every single console, so it's a problem across the board. So the perception of games in order to be this medium, in order to actually create entertainment, probably went down, especially since the fact that anti-piracy laws made these sort of games be, over-marketed. The next point actually rings a lot of truth when it comes to today, and that would be just the overwhelming amount of growth that happened before this time. See, the gaming revenue back then, and I don't mean in, 83, a lot of the revenue was kind of sporadic. So, like, at 1977, you would have 75 million when it comes to revenue in games. Then in, 1978, it's like 204 million. Then 1979, 571 million. Then 1980, about 995 million. And then finally in 1981, you would have growth spurt of about $3 billion from revenue from games in general. This growth was way too rapid. It essentially made a lot of people believe that this thing probably could not fail. Or, if it could fail, it doesn't really matter because you can just jump in to get whatever sort of revenue that you can and then finally bounce. This actually pairs with the next point, which is overproduction. See, because of the exponential revenue, people thought it would keep going. So if you just put more money in order to not only create consoles, but also retail space, it doesn't matter potentially the debt that you could get, because overall, because you think of what happened beforehand with the revenue, you'll just make your money back. In reality, because of the other issues present, it's not really going to happen that way. You're actually going to go into debt by either getting retail space or producing your consoles, and the revenue that you get will not happen. Essentially, they thought line go up, and it's not always going to be like that, so you invested too much when you really shouldn't have invested too much at all. And finally, I think I don't want to say nail to the coffin, because a lot of these problems are kind of equal when you look at them, but some of the worst things about this sort of era was kind of like the games. When people talk about the gaming crash, there's always two games that they talk about. That was like E.T. and like Pac-Man. These games are kind of like, they kind of provide from the other problems that I was talking about, you know? Because of things such as, you know, the piracy laws, you know, these kinds of games can be shipped out in like, I don't know, 3 weeks, maybe even like 2-3 months, and like everyone could get away with it. But because of that, they were so influential because of, you know, the titles of them, E.T. and Pac-Man at the time. But the problem is that they were shittily made. So a lot of people bought them only to realize that the game freaking sucks. And because so many of those games were sold to so many people, the sort of good nature about like home console games kind of like went away. I have heard that when it came to computer games, people actually use it as a comparison. So they were just like, why would you buy a sort of home console when you can get like, you know, a computer game, or like go to the arcade and probably have a better time? It definitely made it so that, you know, the sort of ambiance when it comes to home console games was kind of off. As you can see, I don't really think it's because of like one big issue that happened in 1983. I think it was just multiple issues on top of one another that just made this sort of shitty era of console gaming. I mean, it basically almost died in America. I say in America because when it came to Europe and Japan, it wasn't really affected like that. Some of the reasons would be that Japan sort of had very strict anti-piracy laws, so they couldn't really get affected by it too much. Not only that, but their markets were kind of separated, so the 15 consoles that were in America were not necessarily into these other sort of countries. So when a lot of them went kaput, these sort of countries were not usually affected. Not affected too much, they were still affected, just not too much. And, you know, this kind of all culminated until Nintendo actually, quote-unquote, saved gaming again. At least in the US, because, again, this would have happened in Japan anyway, maybe in Europe anyway. But, you know, it all kind of culminated for Nintendo to save the era. And that's basically the crash of '83. It was just a culmination of bad things going on in the market. And because of it, it made it so that the home console gaming part of it kind of went kaput for a long time, at least until Nintendo came to the scene. So, how can we use this information for nowadays? Well, I'll tell ya. Remember, back then the gaming crash was more so on consoles, so we kind of have to compare that for here. So we have to say that, you know, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, all of those consoles will eventually, you know, die. When you make comparisons, it doesn't really seem that way, at least at first. Market saturation isn't really there. When it comes to, like, you know, going for consoles, there's really 3 choices, maybe 4 if you want to count the Steam Deck, but really there's 3. And although a lot of them are playing the same games, some of them have different accesses to sort of mediums in order to really divide them up. You know, in Xbox, you have that, you know, that service plan. I forgot what it is. I'll put it up. In sort of Nintendo, they usually do their own thing. They usually try to focus on things being like toys to people. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what PlayStation really does. This is coming from a person that has played, PlayStation 2 and like think that that's, my favorite console. I honestly don't know what PlayStation has over every single other market. I don't know. But even then, I don't really know if the problems that we have now would really consider them, up for death. But to placate that, there is a few things that the gaming crash of 83 did have that we kind of do have now. It's just kind of different. Of the three I mentioned, it's definitely booming rapidly, overproduction, and shitty games. For booming rapidly, here's what we got. See, back then, in the COVID times, there wasn't really a lot to do. The world was kind of in stasis. So a lot of things that you wanted to do, or like hobbies that you have, would be full force at the end of the day. So at that point, a lot of people who probably didn't game or only gamed a little bit probably did a lot more. So in the gaming space, games and revenue from it kind of boomed for every single other console, whether that's Nintendo, PC games, Xbox, PlayStation. It didn't matter because so many people basically had nothing to do, and there's too many like negative things happening in the world, so you might as well do something that you like in these trying times, which was video games. The problem with that is, a lot of publishers and a lot of people at the top, now they're thinking, okay, line go up now, so it goes up indefinitely, when it doesn't do that. The amount of progress and the amount of money that you got from video games back then in those times were inflated because a disaster happened. This makes the bigwigs have very bad egos, and it makes it so that gaming bloat on their budgets happen more. Again, this is kind of the overproduction side. Because you had so much revenue back then, and because so many people want to be that, that $60 game that everyone plays for a long time, you now have a lot of companies at this point bloating their budgets and getting more sort of, employees and shit like that in order to inflate their budgets. They believe in the same realm of like, school education. If you just throw money at the problem, it'll be fixed. It won't. And finally, as a major comparison, just shitty games in general. Bro, I can't even find one person to defend these lists of games. For freaking Suicide Squad, Forspoken, Concord, and now fucking Marathon. If these games keep being just shoved into people's faces, and because of not only their bloated budgets, but also they believe that everything is gonna be fine, these games not only flop, but they make the same people that make the games look bad. Look at the new Assassin's Creed game. It's a AAA game. It's not putting up the numbers that it really should, especially since it's trying to get out the rut that the company has made throughout, the past 10 years. Like, it's doing decently if you compare it to, like, I don't know, AA games. But considering the amount of bloat and the sort of, projections that they've had, it's pretty much a flop. So you know what? There's 3 comparisons right there to that gaming crash compared to what can happen now. Unfortunately, there is a lot of terrible things going on that kind of make it worse. For example, we've had a buildup of negativity going on anyway. There's microtransactions, there's battle passes. Like, we have so much fatigue because it's happened for basically a decade that it's like, I don't know, you already have people mad. So doing more things that would make people even more mad would be even worse. Look at Battlefront 2 for Star Wars and like Shadow of War. These things were kind of supposed to be microtransactions husk, but like as soon as they're gone, a few years later, more and more people want to actually play them. It's like, there's definitely been too much negativity when it comes to that. Look at the new pricings for $80 games, and I'm gonna remind you all, I even think games probably in like 2 years will be $90, if not $100. People want to say inflation, people want to say tariffs, but again, if if the inflation actually goes down, if the tariffs actually go down, will that mean that these products that we've been paying for actually go down as well? No, they keep their prices. So you'll be enjoying these $80 games now that you basically have to pay, that you know Nintendo and Xbox are doing. But also, probably in another 2 years, if I'm being honest, since, you know, GTA is going to be a thing, you're going to have to pay $100 for, like, base games sometimes. And that already, compared to everything else, is dumb. I also think one of the biggest things that people talk about, but we don't really comprehend too much, is the fact that, you know, wages haven't really gone up for the past 50 years. You know, inflation comes up, but our wages do not represent, you know, the increase of that inflation, and we really don't get any more money. So it's like, how are we supposed to do our thing to buy our, you know, unnecessities like video games when the price of rent has gone up, when the price of groceries have gone up, and, you know, so on and so forth? It makes every single other thing that they have done bad worse, because it's like looking at someone that is slowly dying and then going up to their pocket and getting their nickel anyway. It's like, how are you gonna ask for that? So not only was it like because we boomed too rapidly, because of overproduction, because of shitty games, but a lot of other things like fatigue, economic decline, just the price tag of games nowadays being $80 to maybe even $100 back then, gaming bloat. It's like, there's so many things going on, and there's so many things happening that I understand why people say that there's going to be a type of gaming crash. I think my only issue with this is that I don't know if it's going to be the crash that we really think is going to happen. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think this is sustainable at all, and if other things and franchises such as Borderlands comes out with shit like that, then I'm pretty sure things will change. But the thing is that the gaming crash, especially back then, were kind of like a console thing. So it'd be pretty much me saying like, oh yeah, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC will die eventually. And I don't know if I could really say that. I think what would happen is that more and more people go to things like PC, like other things like that, in order to actually get their games. What would happen is that more and more people are going to spend less on the console market. They'll be afloat, but they don't want to be afloat. They want number go up all the time. It's kind of why I think the Switch 2, even if it is somewhat successful, if it's not as successful as the Switch 1 or even more, then they'll just consider it a failure anyway. I think more and more people would definitely think about PC options, especially since consoles are practically like very expensive either way. Like, you know, we have $450 for Nintendo and like $700 for like PlayStation maybe. I don't know. I've heard of many people trying to get like $500 rigs for PCs that are like, you know, cheap. What I think is going to happen is that the consoles themselves might stay afloat, but games aren't really going to be purchased like that. People are going to stay away from the $80 games, especially after 6 months of like the new cycle of like $80 games. What they're going to do is that they're going to avoid those things and like turn to indie games or like way cheaper options, or straight up just go to PC. $80 games, even $70 games, are ridiculous. And I will say that as an American. It's just fucking ridiculous, and I will not pay for it. So, because of that, they're just gonna go to better options. And what's gonna happen is that the companies are actually gonna have to, you know, look at themselves in the mirror and see how we can, you know, make it worth it for the customer. Because it's like, I don't know. When you see the amount of bloat that a lot of bigger publishers do, that a lot of they put into their games, when you see a lot of how, you know, we deal with things such as microtransactions and battle passes anyway, and we don't really even get a full game at the start anyway, it's kind of unsustainable. And pretty much, I think, really, the only reason why we've had a big enough boon as it is right now is because COVID happened. So a lot more things were sold when they probably wouldn't have been in any other normal circumstance. It's very weird because I do think eventually there will be some type of crash, but the problem is that comparing it to the other crash of back then, console gaming kind of died and had to be, and had to be resurrected by another company in America. So it's like, I don't really know if I would say that's going to happen, but I definitely do think that, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 years afterward, that what's going to happen is that we're going to see prices and margins go way down, even if they do play these or buy these $80 games. What happens is that the margins is going to go down, or more down than, COVID times. And they're going to think to their shareholders that, oh no, it's useless. Might as well not even. And then hopefully improve. It's going to take a while because, there's a lot of people that still would buy the console even if there's no improvements. There would people that would shill out the, $100 even if it was for, I don't know, Mario games or whatever. There's still going to be that audience. But the problem is that most of the audience is going to not be, those individuals that are fanboys. The market is regular people. And if regular people are not getting as much money as possible, if they're, going more and more broke, if the games are getting worse, if the games are getting, a lot more expensive, then the only thing that's gonna happen is they're not gonna buckle up and nut up in order to, purchase these games and these consoles. What's gonna happen is that they'll just pick the ones that are less. And that's going to be really bad, because if you spent like hundreds of millions of dollars in order to sell this game and it only does decently, you're fucked. So, in conclusion, yes, there will be some type of crash. I don't think it means that, console gaming will die. What will happen is, hopefully the government can finally just admit that we're in a fucking recession. I mean, we've been in it for the past, 4 years at this point? Maybe even 6? We'll identify that we're in a recession. Companies will finally know, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing this to the customer because they ain't buying our games anyway, and they ain't buying our consoles anyway. They're just getting, like, mini computers and shit like that in order to play these games anyway. They'll recognize that maybe the business practices can actually be a little bit less so, and we can actually start getting, improvements. I'm just saying to every single person out there, I know it's rough, especially since some of you, at least most of you, are not really console fanboys. Like, a lot of you just picked a certain console, that you had, like, a good repertoire of games, whether it's the Switch, the Xbox, or PS5. You pick that and you're like, I don't have a lot of money in order to buy a PC, so I'll just stick with that. Hopefully there are good games and, like, it's a good service. And, I understand. However, I would say to you personally, if you do really care as much, if you do want to make sure that everything goes well, I would just recommend, hey, the biggest games that come out that are $70 to $80 and you're either not that interested really, and it might be a gamble anyway, just skip out on it. Most of the time, there's going to be games that are like $30, $40, maybe even $50, especially nowadays, that can actually provide you something of worth of your time, and they won't be like riddled with DLC, they won't be riddled with like microtransactions. I'm just saying, I think you deserve better. And I think with doing those sorts of choices, even though they may be small to you, those things are recognized by the people in the higher ups that are in every single company. They realize that data. So it's like, small changes now, especially good changes now, can lead to something better in the future. I understand a lot of us can be discouraged. A lot of us can be, kind of anal about it, where it's like, I understand it's $80 to $100, but it's like my favorite game of all time. I just want something in this world of happiness. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I'm just saying, things are not going to get better by you impulse buying. Things are not going to develop by you having no self-control. I understand. Shit about life right now has gotten fucked. I get it. The housing market sucks. Jobs suck. I'm currently in one. Shit blows. You don't get enough wages as possible. Everyone is meaner now. Everyone is more divided than usual. So why should I care if things are like $80, $90, $100 with DLC, as long as it's something that I know that I can be happy with? I can understand that. At the same time, you have to understand that doing that will not make things better. You ignoring it will not make things better. And if you want to accept that, then you go right ahead and accept that. But if there's doubt in your mind, maybe it's telling you something. So yes, all of you should get ready for the quote-unquote next potential gaming crash. But if you want it to, come faster, or you want to force people to actually, treat you like a human being, make good choices. Little things help.